atomic propositions. In this exercise, we want to construct a compound proposition W using only the aforementioned propositions and the connectives, negation, conjunction, and disjunction, such that the following truth table is satisfied. Alright, you see that here we're already given a truth table for P, Q, R, and W. If we do know how to write W explicitly in terms of P, Q, and R, it will be straightforward and almost trivial to determine the truth value of W if we know an interpretation for P, Q, and R. However, here the true challenge is that we're not given that explicit expression. Rather, we should analyze the truth table and from there do some reverse engineering in order to recover that expression. At the very beginning, you might be tempted to try some random combinations using these propositions and connectives, but you will soon realize that this approach is not efficient. Indeed, we can complete this construction in a very systematic way consisting of only 3 steps. First, let us locate all rows for which W is true. We have row number 2, row number 5, as well as row number 8. Now, in the second step, we will construct an intermediate proposition for each of these rows. To illustrate the idea, let us focus on row 2. As you can see, the truth values are given as P is true, Q is true, and R is false. Now, let us consider a proposition, namely D2, defined as P and Q and not R. We see clearly that D2 is true if and only if P is true, Q is true, and not R is true, that is, R is false. Otherwise, D2 is false. In other words, if we consider all 8 rows where the truth values of P, Q, R are given, D2 is true only for the second row, and false otherwise. We can easily adapt the same idea to the construction of D5 for row 5. There, P is false, Q is true, and R is true. Thus, we define D5 as not P and Q and R. Clearly, D5 becomes true if and only if the interpretation is given as in row 5. Otherwise, it is false. Finally, we can define D8 in a similar way. That is, not P and not Q and not R. This is because in the last row, P, Q, R are all false. In this way, D8 thus defined is true if and only if the interpretation is given as in row 8. Otherwise, it is false. Alright, at this moment, we have finished the construction for all these intermediate propositions, which will be the building block of our final construction. Finally, let us consider the disjunction of all these intermediate propositions. That is, we consider D2 or D5 or D8. Since this is a disjunction, it is true if and only if some component is true. That is, it is true if either D2 is true or D5 is true or D8 is true. In all the other cases, it will be false. But that means precisely that this disjunction is true if and only if we are falling into an interpretation given in row 2 or row 5 or row 8 because of the properties for those intermediate propositions. As a result, we can write W as this disjunction. Now recalling the definition for D2, D5, D8. We see that the right-hand side consists of nothing more than the 3 atomic propositions, as well as the connectives, negation, conjunction, and disjunction. Thus, it meets the requirement.